The door shatters before the family wakes up. In the darkness of pre-dawn, in a city in western Iran, armed men dressed in black storm a small apartment. They carry no arrest warrant. They give no reason. A father, a community activist, Zana, is dragged from his bed in front of his terrified children. His wife begs to know where they are taking him. The only answer is the silence of a violently slammed door and the sound of a car speeding away. This is not a scene from a movie. This scene, or one like it, is the reality lived by countless Kurdish families in Iran. Since July 2025, a violent and escalating crackdown has been launched, and behind the official silence, a secret war is being waged against an entire people. Why is this happening now? And what are the stories the regime does not want the world to see? What ignited the fuse of this brutal crackdown in the summer of 2025? To understand that, we must go back a few weeks, to June. For 12 days, Iran and Israel were in a short but intense conflict, ending with a fragile US-brokered ceasefire on June 24th. The exhausted and frightened Iranian regime immediately turned its gaze inward. Officials became obsessed with the possibility of internal unrest and Israeli agents inside the country. They needed a scapegoat. They found it in a people they have oppressed for decades, the Kurds. The signal came just one day after the ceasefire. On June 25, 2025, 3 Kurdish political prisoners were secretly executed in Urumia Central Prison: Idris Ali, Azad Shujai, and Rasul Ahmad Rasul, according to the Hengao Human Rights Organization. The state accused them of espionage and collaboration with Israel, but human rights groups confirmed they were forced to give false confessions under torture. Their families were not notified. They were not allowed a final visit. Their bodies were not returned. It was a message sent in the shadows but clearly directed at all of eastern Kurdistan, Rojhelat. The external war may have ended, but the internal war had begun. What followed was a systematic campaign of intimidation. Under the pretext of national security, Iranian security forces, including the Revolutionary Guard, launched a wide wave of arrests. Since the end of the conflict, human rights organizations have documented more than 250 arrests of Kurds, activists and ordinary citizens alike. The charges are ready-made: espionage, armed rebellion, and enmity against God. This is not limited to politicians. Among the detainees are teachers, artists, environmentalists, and even relatives of activists abroad. Zara Mohammadi, who ran a small class teaching children the Kurdish language, a language banned in Iranian schools. One evening in May 2019, in the city of Sineh, she was summoned by the Ministry of Intelligence and never returned, a deliberate method of spreading fear. Arrests are often violent, without warrants, and detainees disappear into a network of secret detention centers where torture is systematic. This persecution is not new. More than 12 million Kurds live in Iran, suffering deep discrimination. Their culture is suppressed, their language marginalized, and their demands for basic rights are met with force. For generations, Kurds have faced imprisonment and execution more than others. What we are seeing now is not a beginning,
but the peak of a policy carried out for decades, now fueled by geopolitical paranoia.
But why the sudden escalation? The answer is not inside Iran alone, but on a Middle Eastern map being reshaped. Since early 2025, Iran's regional proxies in Lebanon, Gaza, and Syria have come under unprecedented blows. The decline of these proxies weakened a network of influence Tehran built for decades and opened the door to early signs of a new political roadmap in the region. Undeclared understandings, shifting alliances, and a reorganization of the regional balance of power. All of this made Iran more tense and sensitive to any potential internal threat. In Syria, a major development occurred in March 2025. The new transitional government reached a historic agreement with the Syrian Democratic Forces, SDF, granting them political and administrative recognition. A symbolic step, but one with significant impact. It gives Syria's Kurds a legitimate political path absent for decades. To the east, in Iraq, the Kurdistan regional government continues as a semi-independent entity with its parliament, forces, and resource control, a ready-made model of Kurdish self-rule. And in Turkey, early signs have appeared of reviving the Turkish-Kurdish peace process. Any political opening that gives Kurds space for negotiation or recognition inside a central state like Turkey reflects symbolically and politically on the Kurds of Iran. For Tehran, these developments are not normal but existential threats. It sees Kurdish political and military forces inside Iran as the biggest internal danger. Unlike other minorities, Kurds in Iran possess an organized political movement, armed factions active along the borders, and strong media and human rights networks abroad. This combination, political, military, and societal, makes the Kurds, in the regime's view, the only group capable of forming an internal threat bloc if the regional environment becomes favorable. This makes the Kurds, in the regime's view, the only group capable of forming an internal threat bloc if the regional conditions align.
These stories are smuggled out in whispers, through encrypted messages, and thanks to brave human rights defenders. If you believe exposing these truths matters, consider subscribing. Your support gives a voice to those the regime wants to silence.
Geopolitical strategies are not just lines on a map. Their price is human lives. For someone like Zana, an accusation of espionage for Israel becomes a death sentence. Inside Iranian prisons, detainees are forced into fabricated confessions under physical and psychological torture. These confessions are then broadcast on state television as grotesque propaganda to justify violence against an entire community. The poor are also targeted. In the rugged border regions, kulbars, goods carriers across the mountains, risk their lives to earn a living. Iranian border forces shoot them without hesitation. Since the crackdown began, kulbars are labeled as infiltrators or spies. In June 2025, Kulbar Seywan Abdullahzadeh was shot dead by border forces. He was not carrying weapons. He was carrying consumer goods. He was a father, killed because he wanted to feed his family. His story is one of thousands where poverty is criminalized and used as a tool of repression.
Yet this is not only a story of victims, but of resilience. For every activist arrested, another finds a way to send information to the world. Despite digital surveillance, Kurds have developed effective documentation networks. Citizen journalists film crackdowns on their phones. Diaspora activists pressure governments. And organizations like Hengao and the Kurdistan Human Rights Network document the killed and detained. Resistance is also cultural. In secret schools where Kurdish is taught, in poetry and music, in mourning gatherings held quietly inside homes, where grief becomes an act of silent defiance. The regime can imprison bodies and demolish homes, but it struggles to erase an idea.
Why now? The secret war on the Kurds is the act of a regime under siege. It feels triumphant after the ceasefire with Israel, but terrified by the rise of Kurds around it. So it strikes inward with brutality. This crackdown is not a sign of strength, but of fear. The future of Iran's Kurds is uncertain. Their struggle is one of the largest unseen conflicts in the Middle East. Whether it shifts from a war in the shadows to a global issue depends on the world's attention. The stories of men like Zana and Seyvan Abdullahzadeh and women like Zara are not just tales of suffering, but testimonies. And in the face of a regime that demands silence, the act of speaking the truth becomes a form of resistance.